Hello everyone, my name is Kenneth Mahuni, a PhD in economics student at the University of Mauritius. My essay is titled Pandemic in a Pandemic, COVID-19, Public Procurement Corruption and Illicit Financial Flows in Sub-Saharan Africa. So my paper is structured into 6 sections, right from the introduction right through to the conclusion. So those are the various sections. So we begin with a quotation from the Financial Times. So it's actually words by a Kenyan activist by the name Wanjeri Deru during an anti-corruption protest in Kenya. So it reads, "Theft doesn't stop even during a pandemic." So Sub-Saharan Africa simply refers to the countries which lie south of the Sahara Desert, excluding North Africa region, with a population of around 1.14 billion and a combined GDP of approximately 1.7 trillion. So Sub-Saharan Africa faces quite a number of challenges, and approximately 400 million people from Sub-Saharan Africa are living in extreme poverty, as shown by the World Bank, and the number is even projected to go up. So among the challenges as observed by the World Economic Forum include unemployment, underemployment, underinvestment in infrastructure, fiscal crisis, political change, climate change, among other problems there. So COVID-19 pandemic came at a time when corruption had already taken root in Sub-Saharan Africa and spreading across the region, hence we call it. So illicit financial flows, then around the 1990s they were simply known as capital flights, but as time went on the definition has been extended in scope and depth. So it now refers to money which is illegal and transferred or used that crosses borders. So that's according to World Bank. Then there are quite a number of categories of illicit financial. So it can be in form of tax and commercial practices, illegal markets, theft type and terrorism financing, as well as corruption. So for this particular paper we focus on the last category, which is. Then we want to look briefly at what is public procurement. So we look at two definitions, one from Asare et al., as well as the other one from Tanzania Procurement Policy. So from the first definition, according to Asare et al., public procurement is simply a way of spending public resources for delivery of goods or services. Then what's also important in the definition is the emphasis on 4 thematic areas in the definition there, in which there is demand assessment, budgeting, awarding and managing of contracts, as well as regulating quality of goods and contracts enforcement. Then Tanzania Procurement Policy gives us a much more comprehensive definition, which in part covers also what we are given by Asare et al. So most importantly, the definition emphasizes that public procurement also includes situations in which public funds are mobilized to procure works, goods and services, even if the government does not get directly in. So just a brief background of some of the public procurement scandals which have rocked Sub-Saharan countries over the years. So we will just give an example here of 5 countries. So for each country we describe briefly the nature of the scandal and also the sector or purpose to which it relates to. So for example, we look at the case of Mauritius. There are two cases there, one in 1994, then the other in 2014, and both cases relate to the energy sector. Then there is also Burundi, in a case which relates to health, and around 184,000 US dollars was misspent around 2014. So these were funds which belonged to the global fund. Then also look at, for example, the case of South Africa. There are about two cases, one 1999, then the other in 2017. Then both cases, one relates to defense, then the other one is with respect to procurement budget. Then lastly, Tanzania has two cases there, one for 2008, then the other for 2015, and both cases relates to the energy sector. So against that background, our paper aims to explore how corruption linked to public procurement due to COVID-19 affects Sub-Saharan African countries. Then also want to examine enabling conditions exacerbating corruption in public procurement due to COVID-19. Then lastly, want also to examine practicable solutions to curtail corruption linked to public procurement in Sub-Saharan Africa beyond COVID-19 health emergency. So under this section, we want to examine several cases relating to COVID-19 procurement in Sub-Saharan Africa, which we witnessed during the height of the pandemic there. So we explore quite a number of countries. So for each respective country, we identify a country, then we just give a brief description of the case. So for example, the case of Cameroon, there an estimated 335 million is said to have been lost through misuse, and it was meant for COVID-19. Then the case of South Africa, around 10 million worth of financial resources for COVID-19 were also investigated, and the case of Malawi, about 1.3 million was lost through procurement and allowance irregularities during COVID-19. Then also look at, for example, the case of Zimbabwe, a tender worth 60 million for COVID-19 materials was awarded irregularly to a Dubai-based company, and the processes did not follow properly down tender procedures. And the case of Ghana is relates to the procurement of a Sputnik vaccine, which was acquired at US $19 per unit instead of US $10 there. So briefly, we summarize the countries which we have explored there. So you can see that from the cases, different financial losses were suffered by the countries due to the corruption in procurement. Then also, largely the leakage of the resources relates to price inflation of materials, equipment, irregular allowances, misappropriation, among other corruption malpractices. So all these actually created fertile ground for illicit financial flows. And then United Nations Office on Drug and Crime report shows that public procurement averages 15 to 30% of GDP for most countries there. And also it further shows that procurement of pharmaceuticals and medical devices normally gobbles large amounts of money. So as a result of that, Due to this, public procurement then becomes a playing field for institutions, public and private officials to enrich themselves through the various corruption. So we now want to look at the effects of COVID-19 public procurement induced corruption in Sub-Saharan Africa. So quite a number of adverse effects have been experienced due to the corruption in public procurement in different Sub-Saharan African countries. So they include under provision of health, a key merit good. For example, Reuters, in a report titled "Virus Exposes Gaping Holes in Africa's Health System," shows that Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Egypt had in between them a total number of 1,920 intensive care unit beds for their combined population of around 400 million. So if we divide there, we find that it's almost like a distribution of around 208,333 people per single ICU bed, which is a serious underprovision there. Then also the other effect is also the increase of corruption as an economic bed. So increased corruption simply opens more room for even more corruption. So due to the COVID-19, it has actually given a lifeline to looters in the region of Sub-Saharan Africa to loot even more. So COVID-19 has acted like some booster shot to rejuvenate corruption networks. Then the other effect has been the increases in inequalities and poverty. So COVID-19 has resulted in disproportionate effects on societies in many dimensions, including inequality. And in most cases, the poor tend to bear the greatest brand of the ravaging effects of COVID-19, unlike the richer and well-to-do members of society. Then the other effect also has been the missing out on Sustainable Development Goal number 3, which speaks on health. So specifically, the goal reads to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. So due to COVID-19, it has actually resulted in the reduction on support, for example, on programs such as TB, HIV, among other complications. As a result, they have to be diverted to the fight of COVID-19. For example, in March 2020, Global Fund actually gave countries the green light to use the funds for programs such as TB, HIV to deal with COVID. Sadly, this has resulted in the undoing progress in these sectors, further causing. Then the other effect of this has been the high labor turnover. So in most cases, COVID-19 opened the floodgate of public procurement ills, resulting in embezzlement of financial resources. The effect of this was under provision of materials to use in health facilities, in the process exposing health workers and demotivating them. So this has even triggered quite a number of exodus from health sectors. For example, the case of Zimbabwe, the Health Services Board reports that around 2,200 workers were actually left the health sector. And then the case of Egypt, though it is not part of Sub-Saharan Africa, but it is reported to have lost around 8,600 doctors to the United States. Then the other effect also is the creation and perpetuation of extractive and exclusive institutions. So COVID-19 health emergence created fertile ground for collusion, allowing criminality to take place. This allowed emergence of fly-by-night companies who position themselves for state-linked tenders. In the process, the public, while the taxpayers actually suffer more. Then at some point, for example, some committees supposed to adjudicate on various bidders have simply been weakened or made powerless to raise flags despite staring at corruption there. Then the other effect is the underinvestment in the health sector due to misallocation of critical resources. So Sub-Saharan countries agreed in 2001 what was known as the Abuja Declaration on Health, whereby countries are supposed to commit 50% of their budgets towards health financing. But then on the ground, you see that most countries are struggling to reach the 15% target, and quite a number of countries are way below the target. So, for example, give an example of several countries there and what they are currently allocating on towards the health. So, for example, Nigeria is allocating just 3%, Kenya's 4.5%, DRC 3.5%, up and right up to South Sudan there, which is allocating just 6%. So what it simply means is this target of 15% will remain elusive. So we now want to look at the conditions that enable public procurement induced corruption in Sub-Saharan Africa. So while there are quite a number of factors which conditions which enable this public procurement corruption to take place, we managed to look into three key factors. So one of them is weak parliamentary oversight. So parliaments are around quite a number of countries in the region are often too weak on oversight, and by the end of the day they fail to hold governments accountable. Then also the issue of stifling of civil liberties. So ideally civil liberties, they help the government of the day to be able to account for its actions to the electorate. But due to COVID-19, then it acted like a gratuitous benefit for most countries in the region, as it gave governments a chance to use response measures excessively to continue to mask up their failure to account to the electorate, mostly through hard lockdowns. So mostly it has been a way to muzzle voices demanding civil space. Then the other condition there is incessant conflicts in Sub-Saharan Africa. So conflicts are still rife in Sub-Saharan Africa. So by the end of the day, conflicts weaken institutions, and this has a twin effect of perpetuating existing predatory institutions or even creating new institutions which only help to prop most of the times and democratic regimes. The resulting weak institutions usually fail to be independent, and normally they apply justice. We now want to look at how to combat corruption related to public procurement in Sub-Saharan Africa. So quite a number of measures can be put in place to combat or to curtail this corruption through public procurement in Sub-Saharan Africa. So key among them is government commitment. Government is key to decisively dealing with corruption linked to procurement in Sub-Saharan Africa due to its role in causing and sustaining this problem. Normally, a legal network is created among the following key stakeholders: influential public officials, influential state institutions, influential individuals linked to influential public officials, then private to influential state institutions. So these prominent actors to corruption related to procurement, we decided to caricature them or to depict them as a simple 4-gear corruption model, which I will show in the next slide. So it actually depicts a corruption ecosystem created by the 4 actors there. So there is our model, which is made up of 4 gears. Gear 1 and 2 basically relates to the government officials as well as institutions. Then gear 3 and 4 relates to private institutions as well as private individuals. So interesting to note that there is that the bigger gear is actually a combination of gear 1 and gear 2, and it simply underscores the key role of government in fighting corruption. So the sheer size of the gear shows us that the immense responsibility of curtailing this corruption rests on the shoulders of government. So from the model, the challenge then in Sub-Saharan Africa is that the gears are so interlocked, creating a special corruption relationship, propelling illicit financial flows through public procurement, which is so difficult to unlock. So what we're simply saying here is that currently in Sub-Saharan Africa, there is a very close working relationship among the actors in gear 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that by the end of the day, they create a corruption network which is very difficult to dismantle or to disengage. And these relationships, this criminal working relationship was actually further cemented by the coming in of COVID-19 as a health emergency. So it actually helped to further lock the gears in the corruption ecosystem. It actually helped to increase the collusion of the players in 1, 2, 3 as well as 4 there. So government is really key in helping to dismantle or to disengage the gears there. So that's why we emphasize on the importance of government commitment in the fight against corruption relating to public procurement. Then there is also the need for protection and strengthening of civil liberties. Civil liberties are very important as they are a crucial marker of any democracy. So you'll see that Transparency International observed that COVID-19 has made it easier for countries to silence freedoms. It allowed countries to also be in a position to actually bypass important checks and balances, fueling illicit financial flows, locking and oiling gears 1, 2, 3, and 4, propelling corruption forward. So there is that need for protection and strengthening of civil liberties so that mostly governments are held accountable. Then there is also the need for public procurement reforms. These are very important. Most importantly, there is a need to embrace technologies. For example, the case of Rwanda, through the help of World Bank, they have been able to put in place an electronic procurement system which has helped to make sure that public procurement is made clean. There is also a need for protection of whistleblowers. So in most cases, there is normally a price to pay for reporting corruption in most Sub-Saharan African countries. This is especially so when a stronger criminal relationship exists among the actors in gear 1, 2, 3, and 4, and even making it difficult to disengage them. Hence, in the process, whistleblowers are usually exposed. Then there's also the need for institutional capacity building and and development. So the role of institutions in fighting corruption linked to public procurement and corruption in general is important. This also rests on the big gear in our model, and the big gear is the potential to help in formulation of institutions such as those which look into issues such as anti-corruption, asset recovery, financial secrecy, and related issues. So also the government is also important to make sure that right institutions are in place, and also that the respective institutions are also strengthened so that they work well in the fight against. So in conclusion, our paper has shown how corruption is rampant in public procurement in Sub-Saharan Africa, and how it is actually feeding into illicit financial flows. So the coming in of COVID-19 in the global economy is a health emergency further worsened this, creating a pandemic in a pandemic scenario. So quite a number of factors we examined which are enabling this corruption take place, including weak oversight, conflicts in the different parts of the region. So these have actually induced corruption either directly or indirectly. So quite a number of measures were proposed in the essay in trying to curtail corruption. So these measures, as we have shown, they basically lie in the 4 gears which we discussed. The main problem being that the gears are so interlocked, making it difficult to disengage them. Over and above all, government remains an integral component of the intervention matrix of dealing with corruption relating to public procurement in Sub-Saharan Africa. Thank you.